Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'm going to be showing you the basics of malware analysis. We will mostly deal with static malware analysis, but I'll also show you dynamic malware analysis in the end. So first thing we have to do is get the malware. For this we can visit the GitHub repository of your choice that has malware samples. Here we will download the zip file and the password for the zip file will be infected. I've picked the Emotet or Emotet sample from 2021, so you can pick that one too. I'll leave the link down in the description. After extracting it, we can see that we have a few interesting files, and to begin with the analysis, I'll jump to my Kali machine. I've shared a folder with the VM so I can access these files on Kali by navigating to my shared folder location. Once we're in the folder, we can run the file command with an asterisk symbol to run it on all the files in the directory. We can see that some of the files have wrong extensions, so we're going to change that. If I nano into the PNG file, we can see that it looks like some code. In this case, it seems to be PowerShell code, so we can rename this file. Inspecting the next file, we can see a clear magic number / file header with the letters MZ. This marks an executable for Windows, so this is interesting for us. Looking at the next file and going through the empty content, we can notice that we do have some code. It looks like obfuscated JavaScript codes, so let's rename it accordingly. And then also catting into the pcap file, we can see some random data. It seems to look like actual pcap files, so we're going to leave that the way it is. The file command also says that it's pcap, so it's probably pcap. We'll try to open this with Wireshark later. And also, of course, if you look at the XLSM file, it seems that it's a legitimate Excel file, so we'll rename it to that for now. So now that we renamed all the files and we know what they are, we can start our analysis. So if we have any macros inside of our Excel file, this is the first thing that we would look at. Using olidump for this situation is always expected, but we can see that olidump won't load it. It doesn't find any macros. So the alternative is looking into the file with the archive manager. Since most of the Office files are basically zip files, they're compressed into it, so if you rename an Office file into .zip, for example, you can double click it with WinRAR, for example, and extract. After a little bit of digging, we see a macro folder, and in it there is a file which uses CMD and MSHTA to get to an IP, meaning this is very likely our first C2 or a malware distribution URL. This is very important in malware analysis because this is the point that we want to report. Now with the C2 extractor, we can look up Whois for this IP and report it with as much proof as we can, and we can send it as a malware distribution IP or URL. So this is important to report because once it's taken down, some of malware's activities are probably going to be limited. So this is an excellent and a very important thing to do in malware analysis. Next, we will investigate our pcap file using Wireshark. So pcap files are usually read by Wireshark. Pcap files, if you don't know, are network traffic capture files. So if you look at all the packets, we can notice that there's too many stuff happening. So let's start with the obvious one, so HTTP. We will follow the TCP stream and look into the data. When I clicked follow TCP stream, a window like this one opened, and going through TCP streams one by one, we're inspecting communication, and we will eventually stumble upon something interesting like the PowerShell code that we've previously seen in one of the files. If you remember, it was a PNG file, and now it looks like this is where it was downloaded. Another thing to note is that if you look at all these URLs and you check them and they're alive, make sure you report them too, because they're likely C2 or malware distribution URLs as well. Now, of course, they could just be decoy URLs, but this is a different topic right now. So as I said, it's safe to assume most of these are malicious. We would usually check that by accessing them from a safe environment, but since this is a malware from 2 years ago, I'm probably assuming that all of them are down, because most malware analysts do their job properly. If there are scripts or malicious files on these URLs, we would, for example, ping their domains and get their IP, and then look up Whois on the IP. And we would also directly look up Whois for the domains themselves, because you can get the domain register contact. You can report everything malicious that you found to these contacts. Of course, don't forget to look into all the other streams of the pcap file and make sure you analyze everything else. And also one thing I noticed is that the pcap file also shows a download of an executable file. And if we take a look at that executable file, it looks like it is the same file that we have in our folder right here. So as I said, that just proves to always explore further. Moving on to the next file, the JS file, we can see that it's hard to read it. So I'm going to just copy all the content and I can copy it into a new file, for example. I'll also make sure that I separate the JavaScript from the HTML, since it will be easier to analyze that way. We can see multiple script tags and some obfuscated JavaScript, as well as some weird base64 strings that, when encoded, actually return random stuff. So let's move on to analyzing our JS file. I can Google JavaScript deobfuscator. This sometimes works and it reduces the amount of work that you have to put in as an analyst. It seems that most of them won't accept my inputs, so what I'll do is I'll just beautify the JS, because that way it's easier to read. We can use any website beautifier, just paste it inside and my script will get replaced with a better looking one. After beautifying it, you can then try to deobfuscate it, because sometimes that works. But for me, this is going to be enough. And also there's probably some syntax errors that are causing the deobfuscator to stop working, but this doesn't bother us right now. Also, the base64 string doesn't look like it's base64, but we do have the unescape function here taking in some weird characters. So it looks like URL encoding, and if we URL decode this, we will get a normal looking string. And now we can see what goes to the eval function. If you don't know about this function basically executes a string. So it treats a string as code and executes it. Let's also beautify another part and try to deobfuscate it, but since it doesn't work again, we can just leave it beautified. The specific string looks like URL encoding or something similar, so we will URL decode that. But after giving it to CyberChef's magic, we can see that it still looks odd. Ideally, after this, you would go to each and every variable, decode it if possible, and rename it according to the things that it does. If there's a variable holding list of numbers, you can call it list of numbers. But as far as I'm concerned, this is a topic for another video. Also, what you can do is look into names of the functions, and you can look into the additions to the variables. For example, right here we have a string that says EVA, and if you add these together, you can see that it's going to give you eval unescape. This is also a part of deobfuscation and just getting to know the code, what it's doing, and we can figure out what the next step is. Oh yeah, you can actually manually put the code into your browser, and then execute it in the console, because JavaScript can execute there. But keep in mind that you have to be careful because some of the code might be malicious, and also this can help you with like deobfuscation. You can just print out some stuff and it's going to give you a more clear message of what that specific piece of code is doing. Okay, considering the time, let's move on to our next file. We have the malware DLL. First step we can do is look it up on VirusTotal and see what we can get. Also, if you don't want the sample to be redistributed, you can use antiscan.me. So it is like VirusTotal, but it has a little bit less information, and apparently they don't distribute the malware sample. I'm saying this for red teams, don't do anything illegal, obviously. After VirusTotal scans are done, we can immediately see that it is malware. Most antivirus tools declare it as Emotet type malware, and here we can read about features of that malware, its relations, connections to IP addresses and their reputation, more features of a malware, and finally the community tab, which usually contains comments from other analysts. So let's jump back to our any run so we can run our dynamic analysis. So simply upload the file and press run and wait until the timer on the right expires. Once it expires, the analysis is done and you can take a look at the summaries. There are system and user statistics, and under that there we can see processes being spawned. So this is mostly where you're going to be looking, and you can click them and you can get more information, and we can even see the full command line often. We can also notice that on our left we have connections, and this is a tab that you'll also be using very often. You can see malware's network communication, and you can find C2s / malware distribution URLs and stuff. So once the timer is done, we can also press the malconf button, which will extract a list of C2s that our malware has contacted. Luckily, this malware is old, so most of these are down, but always check all of them to make sure. And here are some other sandboxes you can also use for free. So Triage, the hybrid analysis, Cuckoo sandbox, as well as some paid ones like Joe Sandbox's Premium, which has shown great results in my experience, Anyruns paid subscription, and more. You can also set up your own sandbox like FlareVM, and I actually recommend this because this is a customized Windows machine with a lot of tools installed for analysis. So you can save the state before running the malware and then roll back once you're done. Now, of course, be careful, make sure that it is in a safe network. If it has to have a network, I recommend having an adapter because it has FakeNet. If you're going to use FakeNet, you're going to need a network. FakeNet basically emulates network traffic for malware, and it's easier for you to analyze stuff. Oh yeah, another thing that I wanted to show you is how to do a Whois lookup. So all you have to do is put in the domain here or the IP, and you can Whois lookup it, and you can get contacts on which you can report malicious activity. So I recommend IP void or viewdns.info and stuff like that, because these have shown me some good results. And another thing that I wanted to say is that you also have a Whois tool on Kali, so you can just use Whois space and then the domain or the IP, and you can grab the abuse contact if you want. And by the way, this isn't anything illegal. Anyone can use Whois, so don't be afraid of using it. And you can, of course, after getting the IP behind the domain, for example, by pinging it, you can look up Whois2 on the IP. And you can do the same thing in order to report malicious activity. So just make sure you report everything you can. Make sure you don't leave something out. Okay, so now the last thing I'm going to show you is how we can analyze this malware with Ghidra. Now, of course, I made a special tutorial for Ghidra, but this is just going to be a quick rundown of what I basically said. So just run Ghidra. You need to make a new project in it, import the executable, and then double click it. The dragon will appear, and then after that, it will just analyze the malware. You have to click for the analysis, and you will just have to wait for a moment. Once the analysis is done, we can click on functions and look into some interesting ones and see what they can do. If this seems too complicated, since some malware won't be as easy as this one to read, you can just look up strings, or you can just navigate through the functions to see if you can get a good start in making it all readable by renaming variables and similar. And also a thing to note is, coming back to your sandboxes and similar tools for malware analysis, a bunch of really cool tools come pre-installed with FlareVM, so make sure you try it out. Tools like XC-info-PE, which basically tells you about packing of the malware and gives you instructions on how to unpack it. So packed malware is packed because it is harder to detect or it is harder to analyze and stuff like that. So unpacking it before you start the analysis is very useful and you should always do it. You also have dnspy, for example, for decompiling .NET malware. So if malware is built with .NET language, you can decompile it easier and you can read it easier with dnspy. So I definitely recommend FlareVM. So Emotet is just an example. You can find any malware that you want. Each one of them is going to be different, and you just need to learn by trying a lot, by practicing a lot, and that is basically the ultimate recipe. There is no course that I can recommend that all of a sudden you'll know everything. It just comes with time. Even though I'm not a huge expert in this, I just wanted to make this video because I've been doing this lately and it's really fun. So I just wanted to give everyone the basics. So that's all for today's video. I hope you all had fun and I hope that you learned something new. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. I always reply pretty fast. And also check out my website for the transcript of the video and more. That's it. I'm sorry I haven't posted in a while. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day.